The server room went dark at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not a flicker, not a brownout, complete surgical blackness. And somewhere in a penthouse suite across town, Marcus Chen, the man who'd fired me 6 hours earlier while laughing about my outdated skill set, was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his career. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Rebecca Torres. For 15 years, I was the invisible woman who kept Nexus Financial running, not the CEO who took the credit, not the board members who cashed the checks. Me, the senior infrastructure architect who knew where every digital body was buried, because I dug most of the graves myself. They called me the plumber behind my back. I knew because I had access to every email server, every Slack channel, every private message thread in the company. When you build the pipes, you see what flows through them. For 15 years, I let it slide. The jokes, the overlooked promotions, the way executives would present my solutions as their own ideas in board meetings while I sat in the back row, taking notes like a secretary. I told myself it was fine. I told myself the work mattered more than the glory. I was wrong. It started 3 months ago when Nexus announced they were bringing in a digital transformation consultant to modernize operations. His name was Marcus Chen, 34 years old, Stanford MBA, and a smile so white it probably had its own dental plan. He arrived on a Monday morning with a team of 20-somethings in matching Patagonia vests, all of them clutching MacBooks and speaking in a language that seemed to consist entirely of words like synergy, disruption, and blockchain-adjacent solutions. I watched from my corner office, the one with no windows, next to the supply closet, as Marcus conducted his first all-hands meeting. "The future belongs to the agile," he announced, pacing like a TED Talk speaker who'd consumed too much caffeine. "And agility means cutting dead weight." His eyes swept the room, lingered on me for just a moment too long. I'd seen that look before. Every company has someone like Marcus, someone who mistakes inexperience for innovation, who confuses disruption with destruction, someone who looks at 15 years of institutional knowledge and sees only a line item to be eliminated. That night, I stayed late. Not unusual. I often stayed late, monitoring systems, applying patches, doing the 1,000 invisible tasks that kept the company breathing. But this time, I wasn't working. I was preparing. See, when you've been the plumber for 15 years, you learn things. You learn which executives are having affairs by watching their calendar syncs. You learn which board members are insider trading by monitoring their access patterns. You learn where every vulnerability lives, every backdoor exists, every failsafe waits to be triggered, and you learn to document everything. I opened the folder I'd been maintaining since 2019, the one labeled Vacation Photos, Hawaii, that nobody would ever think to open. Inside were 15 years of receipts, every system I'd designed, every crisis I'd prevented, every patent filed under my name that the company legally owned but couldn't operate without my continued involvement. Most importantly, there were the access protocols. Nexus Financial processed $4.2 billion in transactions daily. Our systems connected to 17 different banking networks, 43 regulatory agencies, and over 200 enterprise clients who trusted us with their most sensitive financial data. Every single one of those connections ran through authentication frameworks I had personally designed, frameworks that required biometric verification from exactly one person, me. Marcus didn't know this, of course. Marcus didn't know anything about how the company actually worked. He'd spent his first week redesigning the office layout and implementing a hot desk policy that nobody wanted. He'd spent his second week conducting efficiency interviews that were really just opportunities to make people grovel for their jobs. By week 3, he'd compiled his hit list. I found out I was on it the same way I found out about everything else, by reading his emails. Not because I was snooping. The man had accidentally given me admin access to his account when he asked IT to set up all that computer stuff. "The Torres woman is the worst," he'd written to his Stanford buddy, now a partner at a venture capital firm. "Been here 15 years and still doesn't have a director title. Classic example of someone who's coasted on institutional inertia. I'm cutting her first to send a message. Classic example, 15 years, 312 system upgrades, 47 prevented security breaches. One time I literally worked for 72 hours straight during a ransomware attack, sleeping in 15-minute intervals on my office floor, while the CEO was at his daughter's wedding in Tuscany. Classic example of coasting. I saved the email, added it to my collection, and kept watching. The execution came on a Tuesday. They always choose Tuesdays, don't they? Early enough in the week to move forward, late enough that Monday's optimism has worn off. Marcus had scheduled it for 11 a.m. I knew because the calendar invite read, "Quick Sync, Rebecca T," and was marked private. In my experience, any meeting scheduled as a quick sync with your full first name is never quick and never a sync. I arrived 5 minutes early, carrying a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. Marcus was already there, flanked by a woman from HR whose name I'd never learned, and a security guard who looked deeply uncomfortable. The guard's name was Jerome. I'd helped his daughter get a scholarship last year through a program I'd set up. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Rebecca, thanks for coming in." Marcus gestured to a chair, his voice dripping with the false warmth of someone about to deliver very bad news. "Please sit." I sat. "I'll get straight to the point." He slid a folder across the table. "After a comprehensive review of our operational structure, we've determined that your position is no longer aligned with our strategic direction." I looked at the folder, didn't touch it. "The company is prepared to offer you a severance package," he continued. 2 weeks for every year of service, continuation of benefits through the end of the quarter, and a positive reference for future opportunities. 2 weeks per year, 30 weeks of salary, for 15 years of keeping this company alive. Of course, this is contingent on signing a standard separation agreement. He smiled, that perfect dental plan smile. Non-disparagement, confidentiality, the usual. I picked up the folder, flipped it open, scanned the pages while Marcus watched with barely concealed satisfaction. The agreement was 12 pages of legal language designed to strip me of every right I had. No talking about the company, no contacting former colleagues, no competing in the financial services sector for 18 months, no disparaging Marcus Chen specifically. That clause was new and almost made me laugh. "There's also a clause about intellectual property," I said mildly, "confirming that all work product developed during my employment belongs to Nexus Financial." "Standard stuff." Marcus waved his hand. "Boilerplate." I closed the folder. "And if I don't sign?" His smile flickered. "Excuse me? If I decline the severance package, what happens then?" Marcus glanced at the HR woman, who shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Rebecca, you'd still be terminated, of course. You'd just be leaving without the benefits of a cooperative separation." "I see." I set the folder down gently. "Tell me, Marcus, when you did your comprehensive review of the company's operational structure, did you happen to review the infrastructure authentication protocols?" He blinked. "The what?" "The authentication protocols. The ones that verify our connections to banking networks, regulatory systems, enterprise clients." I kept my voice pleasant, conversational. "The ones that process $4.2 billion in daily transactions. That's an IT matter. I'm sure the technology team has it handled." "I am the technology team." I smiled for the first time. "Well, I was. As of about 3 minutes ago, I believe you terminated my employment, which means my biometric authentication is no longer authorized to verify those connections." The HR woman's pen stopped moving. "What exactly are you saying?" Marcus's voice had lost some of its smoothness. "I'm saying that when I walked through that door this morning, I initiated a dead man's switch." I leaned back in my chair. "It's a security protocol I designed in 2018, after the Colonial Pipeline attack. If my biometric authentication isn't verified within the system every 4 hours, the protocol assumes I'm either dead, kidnapped, or otherwise compromised. And it begins an automatic shutdown of all external connections. Every banking network, every regulatory link, every enterprise client pipeline. All of it goes dark within 60 seconds of the trigger." Marcus laughed, but it came out strangled. "That's ridiculous. No company would design a system with a single point of failure." "You're right. They wouldn't, unless that single point of failure was also the person who'd been begging for a backup authentication team for 7 years. I tilted my head. "I have emails. Would you like to see them? The ones where I warned the previous CEO that our security protocols were dangerously centralized. The ones where he replied that budget constraints didn't allow for redundancy in non-revenue generating departments." The room had gone very quiet. "The board was informed," I continued. "Legal was informed. Everyone signed off on the risk because they assumed I'd never leave. Why would I? I was a classic example of institutional inertia. I'd be here forever, keeping the lights on, never asking for too much." I checked my watch. "By my count, you terminated my employment approximately 4 minutes ago, which means the dead man's switch will trigger in 3 hours and 56 minutes, unless I verify my biometric authentication." Marcus's face had gone the color of old paper. "You're bluffing. Try me." He reached for his phone, probably to call the CTO, a man named Gerald who played golf every Tuesday and hadn't touched a line of code since 1997. "Gerald won't help you," I said calmly. "Neither will anyone else on the technology team. The system doesn't accept their biometrics. It only accepts mine. That was the whole point of the dead man's switch. If I'm compromised, no one can impersonate me." The HR woman was rapidly texting someone under the table. The security guard, Jerome, was staring at the ceiling like he wished he could disappear into it. "This is extortion," Marcus finally managed. "No," I stood smoothing my blazer. "Extortion would be demanding something in exchange for not destroying your company. I'm not demanding anything. I'm simply leaving. As you requested." I walked toward the door. "Wait," Marcus's voice cracked. "Wait, we can discuss this. Revisit the terms of your departure." "Can we?" I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "How interesting. 5 minutes ago, you were quite certain my position was no longer aligned with your strategic direction. What changed?" He swallowed. "Perhaps we were hasty." Hasty. I let the word hang in the air. 15 years, Marcus. I've given this company 15 years. I've missed birthdays, funerals, my own mother's last Christmas because there was a systems emergency that only I could resolve. And you were hasty. I didn't know. No, you didn't. I opened the door. And that's exactly the problem. I walked out, leaving chaos in my wake. The next 4 hours were the most entertaining of my career. I went home, made myself a cup of tea, turned on a meditation app, just for the irony, and waited. My phone exploded, of course. 17 missed calls from Marcus, 12 from Gerald the golf-playing CTO, 8 from the CEO's executive assistant, each voicemail more panicked than the last. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the monitoring dashboard I'd set up years ago, the one that let me watch the company's systems from anywhere in the world. Officially, it was for emergency response. Unofficially, it was my window into the asylum. The first sign of panic appeared at 1:15 p.m. when someone in the IT department noticed that external connections were showing verification pending status. Nothing was broken yet, but the yellow warning lights were blinking. By 2:30 p.m., the trading floor was in chaos. Transaction processing had slowed to a crawl as the system waited for authentication that wasn't coming. Clients were calling. Regulators were calling. The CFO was apparently screaming at anyone within earshot. At 3:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the dead man's switch would trigger, I received an email from the board of directors. Not Marcus, not Gerald, the actual board. "Ms. Torres, we understand there may have been a miscommunication regarding your employment status. The board would very much appreciate the opportunity to discuss your continued involvement with Nexus Financial at your earliest convenience. Please advise on your availability. Respectfully, Harrison Wells, chairman of the board." A miscommunication. I'd been publicly terminated, escorted out by security, and had my access revoked, and now it was a miscommunication. I let the email sit for 10 minutes. Then I replied, "Mr. Wells, thank you for reaching out. I'm available for a call at 4:30 p.m. today. 30 minutes after my authentication would normally time out. I trust that provides sufficient motivation for a productive conversation. Best regards, Rebecca Torres." I knew they'd be sweating for those 30 minutes. Good. At exactly 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Ms. Torres." Harrison Wells sounded like he'd aged 10 years since this morning. "Thank you for taking this call." "Of course, Mr. Wells. I understand there was a miscommunication?" "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "It appears Mr. Chen may have acted precipitously. The board was not fully informed of your role in our infrastructure before the decision was made. How unfortunate. We'd like to discuss reinstating your position, with, of course, appropriate compensation for any distress caused." "I see." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "And Mr. Chen?" Another throat clear. "Mr. Chen's engagement with Nexus Financial will be concluding earlier than anticipated." "How much earlier?" "Immediately." I let myself smile. "Well, Mr. Wells, that's certainly a step in the right direction, but I'm afraid reinstatement won't be sufficient." "What exactly are you looking for, Ms. Torres?" I'd prepared this list for years. Never thought I'd actually use it. "First, I want a promotion to Chief Technology Officer. Gerald can keep his title, make him CTO Emeritus, or whatever you like, but I want the authority and the salary." "That's a significant jump. So is processing 4.2 billion into daily transactions." "Second, I want a seat on the board. Observer status to start, with full voting rights within 18 months. Ms. Torres." "Third, I want an equity stake. 2% of outstanding shares vested immediately. 2%. Fourth, I want a public apology. Not from Marcus. I couldn't care less about Marcus. From the board, acknowledging that the company's infrastructure has been critically dependent on undervalued employees for too long. The silence on the line was deafening. And if we decline, Harrison finally asked. I checked my watch. Then, in approximately 16 minutes, every banking connection, regulatory link, and enterprise client pipeline goes dark. Your clients lose access to $4.2 billion in those daily transactions. Regulators launch investigations. Your stock price, currently trading at $47.50 if I'm not mistaken, probably drops by half before market close tomorrow. This is blackmail. No, Mr. Wells, this is negotiation. Blackmail would be threatening to release the email archives I've collected over 15 years, the ones documenting insider trading by board members, sexual harassment by senior executives, and systematic wage theft across multiple departments. I kept my voice pleasant. I'm not threatening to release those. I'm simply informing you that they exist and that my goodwill is perhaps more valuable than you previously realized. More silence. I'll need to consult with the other board members, Harrison said weakly. You have 12 minutes. The line went dead. I made myself another cup of tea. 11 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email. Ms. Torres, the board has reviewed your terms and finds them acceptable. Please confirm the attached agreement at your earliest convenience. Welcome to the leadership team. Harrison Wells, chairman of the board. I reviewed the agreement. CTO title, board seat, equity stake, public apology. All of it exactly as I'd demanded. Then I logged into the Nexus systems, verified my biometric authentication, and watched the yellow warning lights turn green. The dead man's switch deactivated. The connections stabilized. The trading floor could breathe again. And I, Rebecca Torres, had just negotiated my way from dead weight to board member in a single afternoon. The aftermath was delicious. Marcus Chen was terminated the next morning, not in a conference room with coffee and false warmth, but via email, with security waiting at his desk before he'd even finished reading the message. His company-issued MacBook was confiscated. His access was revoked. His perfectly white smile was probably cracking as I watched his subordinates carry boxes to his car. I made sure to wave from my new corner office, the one with windows. The board's public apology came a week later, buried in an investor relations announcement, but present nonetheless. Nexus Financial acknowledges that our operational success depends on the dedicated professionals who maintain our infrastructure, and we are committed to ensuring their contributions are appropriately recognized going forward. Corporate speak for, we almost nuked ourselves by firing the wrong person. But the real satisfaction came slowly, in the weeks and months that followed. As CTO, I had full authority over technology decisions for the first time. Within 3 months, I'd hired a proper infrastructure team, redundant authentication protocols, distributed fail-safes, actual succession planning. The dead man's switch was quietly deactivated, replaced by systems that didn't depend on any single person. Because here's the thing, I never wanted to be indispensable. I wanted to be valued. There's a difference. When you're indispensable, you're trapped. Every vacation is interrupted by emergency calls. Every sick day requires remote access. You can't leave because you're the only one holding the walls up. But when you're valued, you're empowered. You can build teams, delegate authority, create systems that outlast your involvement. Actually take a day off without worrying that the whole thing will collapse. The irony is that Marcus was right about one thing. The company did need to modernize. It just didn't need him to do it. Under my leadership, we implemented the changes he'd been blathering about, but properly, systematically, with input from the people who actually understood the systems. We upgraded our transaction processing by 300%. We reduced downtime by 85%. We passed every regulatory audit with flying colors, and we did it without firing anyone who mattered. 6 months after my promotion, I received a LinkedIn message from Marcus Chen. He was now listed as a strategic advisor at some startup I'd never heard of, which in LinkedIn terms meant unemployed. Rebecca, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out and congratulate you on your new role. I always knew you had potential. If you ever need consulting services for digital transformation initiatives, I'd love to reconnect. Best, Marcus. I stared at the message for a long moment. He'd called me dead weight. He'd tried to eliminate me to send a message. He'd dismissed 15 years of expertise as institutional inertia, and now he wanted to reconnect. I typed my reply carefully. Marcus, thank you for your message. Unfortunately, Nexus Financial has no current need for strategic advisors. However, I understand our facilities management department is looking for someone to oversee the supply closet inventory. Given your experience with modernization initiatives, you might be a good fit. Let me know if you'd like me to pass along your resume. Best regards, Rebecca Torres, Chief Technology Officer, Nexus Financial. I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, my new chair, the expensive ergonomic one with actual lumbar support, and watched the sun set through my window. Some lessons are expensive. Marcus was learning that now. And me? I was finally learning what I'd been too busy keeping the lights on to understand. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's not even success, not really. The best revenge is making them see exactly what they tried to throw away, and making them live with that knowledge for the rest of their careers. 1 year later, Nexus Financial's stock price had doubled. Our client base had expanded by 40%, and I'd been featured in Fortune magazine as one of 50 women reshaping finance. The interviewer asked me what advice I'd give to women in technology who felt undervalued. I thought about Marcus, about 15 years of being the plumber, about that Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Document everything, I said, and never underestimate the power of being the one who knows where all the bodies are buried. She laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. The night before the Fortune article published, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Ms. Torres, you don't know me, but I know you. I've been following your story since the incident last year. Everyone in infrastructure circles has. I'm in a similar situation. 15 years at a healthcare company, built every critical system they run, and now they're bringing in consultants to optimize operations. I know what that means. I found your dead man's switch protocol in some old conference notes. Would you be willing to talk? I'm not looking for revenge. I'm just looking for options. Thank you. Linda Okonkwo, Senior Systems Architect, company name redacted. I read the email 3 times. Then I replied, Linda, I understand exactly where you are. I've been there. I'll share what I learned, but I want to be clear. What I did was a last resort, not a first option. The dead man's switch was dangerous. It could have destroyed the company entirely, and me along with it. But here's what I wish someone had told me 15 years ago. Your value isn't defined by your title. It's defined by what falls apart when you leave. Most people in leadership don't understand this. They think value means visibility, the corner office, the board meetings, the magazine features. They don't realize that the most valuable people are often the invisible ones, the ones keeping the machinery running while everyone else takes credit. If you're building critical infrastructure, you have power. The question is how you use it. Option 1. Use it defensively. Document everything. Ensure that your contributions are formally recognized, legally protected, and operationally essential. Make yourself unfireable, not through threats, but through indispensability. Option 2. Use it as leverage, not to destroy but to negotiate. When they come for you, and they will come for you eventually, because people like Marcus Chen are everywhere, you'll have something to bargain with. Option 3. Use it to build something of your own. Take what you know and create systems that don't require you to be undervalued. Start your own company. Join an organization that treats its people like assets instead of expenses. I don't know which option is right for you. That depends on your situation, your risk tolerance, your values. But I do know this. You are not dead weight. You are not a line item to be cut. You are the person who keeps the lights on, and that matters. Don't let anyone make you forget it. If you want to talk more, I'm available. My calendar is linked below. Best, Rebecca Torres. I sent the email. Then I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The city sparkled below. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was probably refreshing LinkedIn, waiting for opportunities that weren't coming. Somewhere out there, Harrison Wells was explaining to investors how a board seat for the former Plumber had actually been his idea all along. And, somewhere out there, women like Linda Okonkwo were realizing that the power had been in their hands the whole time. They'd just been taught not to use it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. She was visiting next week, first time since I'd missed her Christmas 3 years ago. A text from my sister, asking if I wanted to get dinner Saturday. A text from my nephew, showing off a coding project he'd built. Life outside of work. Actual life. The kind I'd sacrificed for 15 years because I thought being indispensable was the same as being valued. It wasn't, but I knew that now. And the lesson, expensive as it was, had been worth it. The story could have ended there. Should have ended there. But Marcus Chen had one more card to play. 3 weeks after the Fortune article, I got a call from our legal department. Marcus was suing the company and me personally for wrongful termination, tortious interference with business relationships, and defamation. The claims were absurd, of course. He'd been the one to terminate me. He'd been the one interfering with business relationships, and the only defamation was me accurately describing what had happened. But lawsuits aren't about truth, they're about leverage. Marcus's lawyer was a shark from one of those firms that specialized in reputation recovery, a polite term for legal intimidation. The suit demanded $50 million in damages, plus a public retraction of my Fortune interview comments, plus reinstatement of Marcus as digital transformation consultant. I read the complaint in my office, coffee going cold, rage building with every page. He wasn't going to win. The facts were on my side, but he could drag this out for years. Deposition after deposition, document request after document request, all designed to make my life miserable until I settled. That's when I remembered my collection. The folder labeled Vacation Photos, Hawaii, the one containing 15 years of receipts. I'd mentioned it to Harrison during our negotiation. The emails documenting insider trading, sexual harassment, wage theft. I'd implied their existence without ever specifying the details. Now I opened the folder, really looked at what I had. It was worse than I remembered. Board members coordinating stock sales before negative earnings announcements, a former VP running a systematic campaign of harassment against female employees, payroll discrepancies affecting hundreds of workers, and Marcus Chen's own email trail, showing not just his contempt for me, but his plan to eliminate the entire infrastructure team and outsource to a company owned by his Stanford buddy. I could destroy them all, every single one, but I wouldn't. Not because I'm merciful, I'm not particularly, but because destruction is easy, building something better is hard. Instead, I called Harrison Wells. Miss Torres. He sounded wary. I assume you're calling about the lawsuit. I am. I kept my voice neutral. Marcus Chen's claims are frivolous, and we both know it, but I'm curious whether the board intends to support my defense or hang me out to dry. The board fully supports you, of course. Our legal team will... Your legal team will do what, exactly? Spend company money on depositions while Marcus's lawyers fish for embarrassing documents? I paused. Documents that might include, say, board communications from the past 15 years? Silence. I've never wanted to use what I know, I continued. I still don't, but if Marcus Chen's lawsuit forces disclosure of archived email threads, I can't control what gets discovered, and neither can you. Harrison's voice tightened. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone should call Marcus's lawyers and explain that this lawsuit is not in anyone's best interest, the company's, Marcus's, certainly not certain board members who may have been somewhat careless in their historical communications. More silence. And in exchange, my Vacation Photos Hawaii folder remains exactly where it's always been. A historical record, nothing more. I could hear Harrison breathing on the other end of the line. I'll make some calls, he said finally. I thought you might. The lawsuit was withdrawn 3 days later, without prejudice, which is legal speak for we quit before we got killed. Marcus's lawyers issued a terse statement about resolving disputes privately and moving forward constructively. Marcus himself disappeared from LinkedIn entirely, his profile now showing only a blank headshot and the title entrepreneur. Good enough for me. I deleted the email about the lawsuit, kept the folder, of course. I'm not stupid, but I didn't need to use it. Sometimes the threat is enough. 2 years later, I left Nexus Financial, not because I was pushed out, quite the opposite. The board offered me the CEO position when Harrison announced his retirement, full control, unlimited authority, my name on the door. I turned it down, because here's what I finally understood. Power isn't the same as purpose. At Nexus, I'd proven I could fight. I'd proven I could win, but fighting had never been what I wanted. What I wanted was to build things that mattered, to create systems that helped people, to leave the world a little better than I found it. You can't do that when you're constantly watching your back. So I left, started my own company, a small firm focused on helping organizations value their invisible workers. We didn't build software. We built processes, systems for recognizing infrastructure talent, frameworks for succession planning, protocols for ensuring that no company ever again finds itself dependent on one person they've neglected to appreciate. We called it Keystone Consulting, because keystones are small and often overlooked, but the whole arch collapses without them. Our first client was Linda Okonkwo's healthcare company, not as adversaries, but as partners. They'd finally listened to Linda, given her a seat at the table, asked her to help them avoid the trap that Nexus had nearly fallen into. Our second client was a referral from Harrison Wells, who'd retired to a beach house in Florida, but apparently couldn't stop networking. Best business decision I ever made, he told the company's CEO, was letting Rebecca Torres rewrite the rules, letting me, as if he'd had a choice, but I let it slide. Some battles aren't worth fighting. By year 5, Keystone Consulting had worked with over 200 companies. We'd helped thousands of infrastructure workers negotiate better positions, and we'd prevented dozens of Marcus Chen situations from ever developing. We didn't make headlines. We didn't need to. The work spoke for itself, and every time I saw a story about some executive who'd fired the wrong person and suffered the consequences, I smiled, not because I enjoyed their failure, but because I knew that somewhere, someone was learning the lesson I'd spent 15 years learning the hard way. The people who keep the lights on are never invisible. They're just waiting for the right moment to remind you who really runs the show. Last month, I got a package at my home address, no return label, plain brown wrapping. Inside was a framed photograph, an old one from back in 2011, showing me standing in front of Nexus Financial's original server room. I looked young, tired, completely unaware of what the next 15 years would bring. Tucked behind the frame was a handwritten note. "Rebecca, I found this cleaning out my office. Thought you should have it. I never told you this, but I knew exactly what you were worth back then. I just didn't know how to say it. I'm sorry. Truly, Gerald." The golf-playing CTO who'd been kicked upstairs to make room for me. The man I'd assumed was part of the problem. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I framed it alongside the photograph and hung them both in my office. Some apologies take years. Some never come at all. But when they do, you take them. And you remember that even the people who failed to protect you weren't always your enemies. Sometimes they were just cowards. Sometimes they were just as trapped as you were. Sometimes they were sorry. It doesn't change what happened. It doesn't fix the damage. But it helps. A little. The server room incident at Nexus Financial became something of a legend in the tech world. They teach it in business schools now. A cautionary tale about critical infrastructure dependencies and succession planning failures. Nobody mentions my name, of course. In the case studies, I'm just the senior engineer or the terminated employee. My tactics are described as high-risk negotiation strategies or unconventional retention methods. That's fine. I don't need the credit. What I need is for the next Rebecca Torres to know that she has options, that she's not as powerless as they want her to believe, that the people who dismiss her as dead weight are usually the ones who can't function without her. Because here's the truth they don't teach in business school. Every company is held together by people nobody thanks. The night janitor who notices the water leak before it floods the data center. The admin assistant who remembers every board member's wife's birthday. The compliance officer who catches the fraud that would have sunk the company. The IT person who answers calls at 3 a.m. because the system is down and nobody else knows how to fix it. These people are not dead weight. They are the weight that keeps the boat from capsizing. And sometimes, just sometimes, they need to remind everyone what happens when you throw them overboard. I hope you never have to do what I did. I hope you work for companies that value you, for leaders who see you, for organizations that understand that the people who keep the lights on are worth more than consultants with good hair and empty buzzwords. But if you don't, if you find yourself being measured by someone who sees only your title and not your value, remember this: you have power, you have knowledge, you have leverage you probably don't even realize. And the moment they try to eliminate you, they'll discover exactly how much of the foundation they've been standing on. Make sure they never forget. Because the best revenge isn't getting even. It's making them understand, really understand, what they tried to throw away, and then making them watch as you build something better without them. I did, and so can you.